Hi, friends. Well, there's a new look coming to Power Apps. Some people love it, some people really don't. But the question remains, should we stop worrying about designing our user interface and just concentrate on the user experience instead? In this video, I'm going to be trying to answer that question, so stay tuned. Well, it's been a long time since we saw the office jewel disappear. You might remember it. Change is inevitable. It's the one thing that is sure in life. And it's a bit of an unfortunate truth, as my friend Adam Vera used to say. Software needs to continually change. If it doesn't change, then it starts to feel outdated. And if it's outdated, then it's less appealing. And if it's less appealing, then your users don't necessarily love it. No one likes to use AS400 terminals anymore, although that might be a bit of a bad example because everyone likes to hack the matrix. In the past, a huge reason for Power Apps being so successful, I think, has been that you could literally do anything, build any colors, any layouts in your application. The sky was the limit. I think that made users really love those apps. Perhaps more importantly, it made the makers of those apps really enjoy making them. It's part of that creative process. But does that come at a cost? So quick UX versus UI primer, and you can kind of skip this bit if you're already one step ahead of me. UX, user experience design, is all about how your application achieves the needs of your users, whereas UI, user interface design, is all about how your application looks. It's the aesthetic. It's like that mood lighting on a bookshelf full of books that you've never read. When you combine the two and you get it right, your users really start to love how that application works. Of course, UX spreads a lot further than just the application. It could be all about the emails they receive or the customer support that they receive. But on the whole, you can change your user interface without drastically changing your application UX. If you create a really bespoke UI to your own custom aesthetic, then if you want to keep that app fresh so that it doesn't start to get dated, well, that's going to be on you. This might not apply to consumer apps, the iOS, Android App Store, where you really need to make an app that's going to stand out from the rest. You really need to make that user interface pop. This might sound a bit controversial, but for business applications, I don't think that it's about standing out. I think it's much more about building fast and efficient applications so that you can use a user interface design language to spend much more time on the user experience and making a really fantastic UX that's going to be easy to maintain over time. Now, Microsoft has been on a mission to find that design language that really works and also keep it fresh. And the most recent part of that journey is Fluent 2. It's cross-platform, it's inclusive, it's accessible. I think it's quite fun, actually. So the burning question is, do we just trust Microsoft with Fluent 2 and build out our apps using it, just concentrating on the UX? If we do build our own UI using our own custom aesthetic, then that probably is going to mean that we've got less time to spend on the UX. But then will that then mean our users won't like our apps because it's not got this flashy user interface? This is a really hard question to answer, especially because there is a shift from this being able to do whatever you like to a much more consistent user interface using Fluent 2 inside Power Apps. So deep breath then. In the beginning, well, actually, user interfaces were quite consistent because they were all built on operating systems that force them to be consistent, like macOS and Windows, pull-down menus, all of those kind of things. But gradually, as the power of graphics processors became greater, applications could do whatever they like, especially with like the browser with HTML. And then there was this explosion of loads of different types of user interfaces. Do you remember skeuomorphism, where user interfaces were trying to look like real life objects with like shadows and things like that? Dataverse and model-driven apps came from the humble beginnings of Microsoft CRM And CRM4 was a web application, and it was trying to emulate that boring user interface of business applications. Word introduced the ribbon, which was this contextual menu bar that actually was sort of revolutionary at the time. It started to be used across all the products, and SharePoint Online adopted it. And because it was now web-enabled, that meant that it could be used in the newest version of CRM 2011. So you can see what's starting to happen. There's already some consistency creeping in here. And then there was a shift to Metro, which was that flat user interface design language, remember, from Windows 8 and the ill-fated Windows Phone. SharePoint introduced SPFX, which had this Office Fabric UI design language, which was very, very new and really easy to use. And then that was rebranded as Microsoft Fluent UI, and it became version 8. This is what became Fluent 1. At some point, Fluent 1 got to a point where it just couldn't actually be evolved any further. There were some accessibility concerns which just couldn't be worked around, and that's where Microsoft started to work on Fluent UI version 9. But at the same time, work started on North Star, which was part of the efforts around Microsoft Teams. But Fluent 1 was like the design language for probably about 6 years or so, and at some point there needed to be this convergence. So Fluent 2 was the combination of both Fluent version 8 and North Star being merged together. And all the Microsoft products are starting to use it. And if you want a really good example, look at the new Microsoft Outlook. And Power Apps traditionally has used Fluent version 8. But the problem was there was also this control style hangover from the original days where it was called AppMagic or Project Sienna, and those were hard-coded controls. So we needed a way of actually creating controls that could adopt this new Fluent UI, which is where PCF, Power Apps Component Framework, came in. And eventually the Fluent UI was then built into Power Apps. So now we could have all of these controls that had this Fluent 1 style to them. This then meant we could create custom controls, which were very, very consistent and looked really nice and fitted with the out-of-the-box controls. Custom pages were introduced, so they fitted inside model-driven apps. Rather than the classic controls, you would use these modern controls, which were designed to look the same to the rest of model-driven apps. So inside Canvas apps now, we've got a modern control preview feature. So this is like the next revision. It's like the modern. It's the refreshed modern version of controls. Now I'm just getting myself into a bit of a twist here. But they're using Fluent 2, and you got a nice theme picker to go with them. So let's take a look at it. First, we create a new Canvas app, because that's where we're going to show you. The same applies for in a custom page as well. Once we've done that, we have a new option inside the settings. If we go to here and then to the upcoming features and look for modern, you can see that we've got try out the modern controls here. That's the new area. So I'll turn that on. So now you can see there's this new theme button on the left. So if we select that, you can see that we have these various different built-in themes. Now, this is what I was talking about before, is that we're moving away from the ability to actually select individual colors for all the different elements like borders and fills, to just simply use the Fluent 2 styles. I'm going to add in just a layout container here. So let's just add in a classic button and just see what that looks like alongside this new modern button. If I go into the styles and search for color like this, you can see that we've got all these different colors that we can select from. Whereas if I go and select one of these new ones and search for color, there's a distinct lack of color properties. And that's because, of course, they're all controlled by the theming. If I change the themes here, you can see that that modern button is changing its colors. And what that means is if I go and add in other elements, like if I go and add in a progress bar and a spinner and maybe a combo box like this, let's put a text input in as well, you'll see that they also take on that same look and feel. If I go and add in alongside this modern combo box, I go and add in a standard combo box. Let's go and search for that. There we are. You'll see it looks so different One thing to remember is if we select these controls, you'll see that there's this little message at the bottom here which says these modern controls properties may differ from classic controls, and there are quite drastic differences. I would hope that some of these differences will gradually get smaller as they get to GA, and you can also provide your feedback and you can say what you like or what you dislike. Really highly recommend you doing that. One thing to watch out for is with the classic combo, you can do delegatable searching. So if I bind both of these combos to the accounts, let's just select the accounts like this. They both, let's say, allow multiple selections and searching. If I run this now, and if I go over to search here, I can search for different accounts. So if I go 1030, for example, you can see that's that. Now, if I go in and search in here for the same thing, so 1030, you'll see that it's not found. And that's because if we just go on the drop down here, then you can see if I go all the way down to the bottom, it's actually not delegable. So you're just getting up to 500 records. And also there seems to be a bit of a rendering issue here. So still some quirks that need to be worked through. And Fluent 2 is also coming to the new look of model-driven apps. So when we turn that on, all of the out-of-the-box controls suddenly turn into Fluent 2 versions. Here's a grid. So we've got the standard grid. You've got some paging down the bottom here. If we go over into the sales accelerator, this is probably where you're going to see most of the differences. The fields here, as you hover, you get this sort of little box, and if I select into it, you can start to edit it. At the top, we've got this little button here that says try the new look. And when we toggle that, it gives us this little dialogue. One of the really important things here is that it says you can switch back at any time. So let's just go and click switch the new look and give it a second. So watch these fields as they change. So suddenly we've got these gray backgrounds on these fields, and as I select it, you get that little animation to see which one is currently selected. Now, some people say that that looks a bit kind of like it's disabled, but if I go over, we can see we've got slightly different look and feel to the command bar here with a little bit of a shadow. But if we go over into a standard model-driven app just to look at the grids, so I've got one here which has got a lot of records. If I scroll down now, you'll see that it's actually doing a kind of like an infinite scrolling thing where it just keeps on loading records. There's also there's a sort of a subtle difference here. We've got like checkboxes rather than those circles. So there's still some areas like this timeline control that doesn't have that look and feel. You can see here it doesn't have that like highlighting. And actually this is still using Fluent 1, whereas all these other controls are using Fluent 2. And if you've got any custom PCF controls, they're still going to be using Fluent 1. So we're going to be in this transitional phase. But luckily, Fluent 1 and Fluent 2 are fairly similar. So on the whole, users probably won't find it too jarring at all. Okay, so let's come back to the big question. Should we stop worrying about UI and let just Microsoft handle it? I know for one that Microsoft employs some very, very clever user interface designers, and they're much better at designing UI than I am. If you go to design.microsoft.com, they've got some amazing blogs. So I'm willing to trust that because Fluent 2 is being used by millions of people in Outlook and Teams, that it's going to work for my apps. Ultimately, of course, we'll have more time to spend on the user experience. And I think probably the better user experience is going to be the biggest impact to how users love our apps. Had a great time at the European Power Platform Conference. I literally got the t-shirt. So I'm also going to be running a Power Apps Component Framework workshop at the Power Platform Conference in Vegas, and then also again at the South Coast Summit. Links are in the description below. I'd love to see you. But until then, all that remains is to say thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers.